Okay, so as we are on, I suppose we can start our next session, educational session, yeah, because we can theorize about boredom irrespectively of discipline. Is it philosophy, psychology, sociology, and so on? Yeah, education is this sphere of life that is usually associated with a lot of massive amounts of boredom, usually because student boredom, irrespective of their age, yeah, is something so common. Yeah, some some researchers also found that boredom at schools, boredom as an emotion is one of the defining features of institutions of education. Maybe not education as it is, yeah, as a cognitive process, it can be very pleasurable, but yeah, an institution of school in general. So I suppose this is still very highly important sphere of boredom studies. Okay, so we have today two presentations. I hope that everything will go fine. So let's start with the first. The first presentation will be from Jennie Blomberg, PhD student in Södertörn University in Sweden, and the title will be The Affective Economy of Boredom, Teachers' Practical Knowledge of Boredom as Sticky. Okay, Jennie, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. To begin with, let me start by saying a few words about the subject, the theory of practical knowledge at Södertörn University. It is an interdisciplinary subject where we examine different forms of practical knowledge in interpersonal professions. Practical knowledge can be understood as a knowledge residing in the body and in experience that can be difficult to put into words because it is often hidden, for instance, in habits, ethical considerations, and skillfulness. Influenced by Aristotelian tradition, phenomenology, and existential philosophy, we explore things like aging, embodiment, and esprit de corps. In my PhD project, I investigate Swedish and Finnish upper secondary school teachers' lived experience of boredom as a way of putting into words their practical knowledge. In the in-depth interviews I have conducted, I take a closer look at when and why teachers are bored and how they deal with their own experience of boredom and the boredom expressed by their pupils. In this presentation, I will share part of my results that deal with how boredom circulates in the classroom. Inspired by Sara Ahmed's theory about how emotions circulate with something, sticks things together, and does something with us, I investigate what boredom does with teachers in relation to their practical knowledge. What I have found out is that in my informant's stories, boredom circulates with foremost three phenomena: the idea of the immature pupil, mobile phones and computer screens, and anxiety. My conclusions is that what boredom does is to intensify the teacher in his role as a screen police on the one hand and entertainer on the other. I begin by explaining Ahmed's theory and take as a starting point one of my informants, Nina, description to show what I have concluded. Nina, who has worked as a teacher for 20 years, says that, I remember when I did my teaching placement. I had a class of pupils of which I thought, no, I'm going to break this. Oh, so boring. So every time I entered the classroom, I did it with a, yep, now we're going to. This is very interesting. And my analysis was that this negative feeling came from one pupil in the class. And now that I've been a teacher for so many years and had classes where I feel that one individual influences the whole class to the point where they are thinking, it is boring, this teaching subject is boring, this teacher is boring, Nina is boring, then it is extremely difficult to break. In my interviews with upper secondary school teachers, they often use the word contagion about boredom. They just, like Nina, say that a pupil or a group of pupils have a feeling that spreads to the rest of the class. But when I analyzed the interviews, I felt that the word contagion didn't match how boredom seems to circulate in the classroom and how the teachers deal with boredom professionally. Without understanding it myself, I searched for a metaphor that would better match what the teachers were expressing. When I read Ahmed's text about the relation between emotions and stickiness, a new way of investigating the relation between emotions and practical knowledge was presented to me. That emotions can do something with us is connected for Ahmed to the fact that emotions circulate with something. She uses the word emotion and argues that emotions surface or touch us. In the everyday, a person, a text, a piece of music, etc. can touch us and leave an impression on us. In turn, we leave an impression on others and other things with our body, facial expressions, words, and so on. This surfacing or touching can differ. For some, it leaves a strong impression, while for others, it soon disappears. In the situation with Nina, a specific pupil leaves a strong emotional impression on her in the form of a fighting spirit. And what the emotion does is that it changes her way of being, and she endeavors to break the pupil's attitude and feeling of boredom. So what does surfacing or touching have to do with stickiness? In the focus of Ahmed's research are the surfacing and emotional processes that lie behind the fact that, for example, certain persons in a society are shaped and valued as disgusting and are surfaced or, as Ahmed calls it, stuck together as a collective that others orient away from. She explains stickiness like this. Stickiness involves a form of relationality or a withness in which the elements that are with get bound together. One can stick by a friend, one can get stuck in traffic. Some forms of stickiness are about holding things together. Some are about blockages or stopping things moving. When a sign or object becomes sticky, it can function to block the movement of other things or signs, and it can function to bind other things or signs together. Stickiness helps us to associate blockages with binding. In other words, the surface is a question of relations of power, where something becomes sticky, if I understand Ahmed correctly, in the following way. When something is repeated over a longer period of time, like for instance when certain bodies are being referred to as disgusting, and when several different things are circulating. In the process behind disgusting group of people, the emotion circulates not only with certain bodies, but also with signs, figures, character traits, etc., which in themselves have become sticky. Together they form a kind of sticky cluster that does something to us. Finally, what surfaces and leaves an impression need not be something that is in the immediate vicinity. Something can become sticky because it carries a historicity. It is, in Ahmed's words, a sign of a presence that is no longer. What sticks can leave an impression on an individual in the form of, for example, memories, and, as I would like to add, a professional tacit knowledge. Thus, emotions circulate with something and through sticking different things together. But the fact that the emotion sticks together with certain things also means that it slides off others. There are bodies, words, and so on that are not part of a cluster of disgusting, and bodies that are not read by others as disgusting. Emotions are, for better or for worse, as Ahmed calls it, a sociality. So what does the circulation of boredom look like in Nina's description? And what does it do? To begin with, boredom circulates by sticking to a certain body in the classroom. which is read by the teacher as a bored pupil. But the circulation does not stop there. It circulates with the whole class as well as with previous classes. A practical knowledge of how to deal with the bored pupil is embodied where former pupils have, so to speak, left a sign of a present that is not longer. But not all of the pupils are stuck together. In her description, I can see a kind of blockage. Nina does not pay attention to the pupils who are not bored, that is, the pupils that boredom slides off. They are there, I dare assume, but only as a quiet, contrasting backdrop against the bored pupil. In this situation where boredom circulates, the affective value of the bored pupil seems to increase. And so she tries to resist and break it. She adjusts her way of being by mustering enthusiasm and cheerfulness. Yep, now we're going to, this is very interesting. I mentioned that the affective value of the bored pupil seems to increase. Inspired by Karl Marx, Ahmed claims that like money, the thing that the emotion sticks to gets its value through circulation. She writes that the more they circulate, the more effective they become, and the more they appear to contain effect. So far, I have approached the question of what boredom does through Nina's description. In this section of my presentation, I will look at a more general description of what boredom does and focus on two narratives that my informants return to, namely the role of the screen police and the entertainer. When I looked more closely at these two and how boredom sticks, there are above all three recurring phenomena that boredom, together with the roles, circulate with. The idea of the immature pupil, the mobile phones and computer screens, and anxiety. I begin by describing these three and then return to the two roles, which I believe are intensified by the circulation of boredom. The immature pupil recurs in the informant's descriptions as a sticky cluster in itself, consisting of the body, young person, and of the character traits given to the immature pupil by the teachers, of which the previously mentioned bored pupil is included. The pupils performs below their ability, lack stamina, has a short attention span, are distracted by screens, and so on. When the teachers talk about the immature pupil, it is often in relation to the teacher's dislike of their use of screens. In both Sweden and Finland, large investments have been made in digitalization, and in the upper secondary school, this has meant that most of the pupils receive their own computer from school or municipality. In addition to having computers, most of them have a mobile phone in their possession during class. The teachers describe how they feel that pupils' attention span has decreased over time because of the screens. The computers are the pupils' most important work tools, but they are also things that distract and attract. They provide fast and easily accessible entertainment, while teachers, on the other hand, offer and call for things that need to be rehearsed, require concentration, that take time, and can be difficult. In short, things that, especially for the immature pupil, easily become boring. In the teacher's descriptions and in my analysis of the circulation of boredom, I have noticed a third recurring phenomena, namely the close relationship between boredom and anxiety. Here I want to return to Ahmed, who, inspired by Heidegger, distinguishes between anxiety and fear. In anxiety, one's thoughts often move quickly between different objects, a movement that works to intensify the sense of anxiety. One thinks of more and more things to be anxious about. The detachment from one given object allows anxiety to accumulate. Given this, anxiety becomes an approach to objects rather than, as with fear, being produced by an object's approach. We can track anxiety in Nina's story. Her thoughts about boredom move quickly and cumulatively. She thinks that they think that it is boring, this teaching subject is boring, the teacher is boring, Nina is boring. Boredom can potentially be anywhere, and she wishes to break it in order to, I believe, regain control. Now, we have arrived at the two roles, screen police and entertainer. In the affective economy of boredom, where boredom circulates with the aforementioned phenomena, teachers circulate as well. In this, I would argue, the roles of screen police and entertainer are intensified. When I ask the teachers to pinpoint what they experience as boring in their professional everyday life, the role of the police or controller is recurring, and these roles are often related to the pupils' way of using their screens. I therefore call the role screen police. In the interviews, the teachers also often talk about themselves as entertainers and can compare themselves to a stand-up comedian's way of working with the audience or an actor's. I want to emphasize the role should not be understood in the sense of how it should be understood in the sense of how a teacher is expected to act and be in his profession, and is therefore not about playing the role of someone else. Part of the teacher's mission is to enable an environment in the classroom where the pupils can work undisturbed, which includes, from the teacher's perspective, a certain amount of control and making remarks. But when my informants say that it is boring to be a controller and a police, they often refer to a situation where they feel they spend too much time and energy on just that. The teachers oscillate between being the teacher they enjoy being and being a screen police. They describe on the one hand what it is like to be a teacher, that is, a teacher who teaches, inspires, and a focus on his teaching subjects. And on the other hand, what it is like to be a screen police, who on a daily basis and year after year makes remarks to the immature pupil. Put your mobile phone away. If you take off your headphones, you will hear me better. Stop gaming during class. In this affective economy, the affective value of the things boredom sticks to increases, as well as the role of being a screen police. In the interviews, the teachers often talk about themselves as entertainers in the sense of catching someone's interest and trying to maintain it for a specific purpose. What emerges in the teacher's stories is that the role of entertainers is intensified in the circulation of the three phenomena. The digitalization of the school has gone on at breakneck speed, and teachers have adapted their teaching accordingly. Using PowerPoints, Kahoot, YouTube, and interactive digital teaching aids, etc., is neither unusual nor strange. But in relation to boredom, it also becomes clear that teachers are adjusting their teaching because they have ended up in a kind of competitive situation. Faced with the pupils' screens, where the fast entertainment is found, they try to keep boredom at bay. Several teachers say that they must have more variety in both method and content and shorten their lectures so that the pupils don't lose interest and get bored. The teacher's practice is divided. The screen police tries to find bearable ways to deal with the pupils' use of different screens so that the entertainer can more easily direct their attention to the large projector screen where another form of entertainment is taking place. In the circulation of boredom, I sense a risk that teachers are being blocked in their opportunities to vary their professional practice. So to round off, by examining how boredom circulates in the classroom, it becomes clear that the three phenomena have great significance for the role of screen police and entertainer. In the informant stories, it becomes clear that they are torn between, on the one hand, the role of screen police and entertainer, On the other hand, the two roles and the teacher they want to be. Here, not only ethical dilemmas are brought to the head, such as how should a teacher relate to her, his pupils, and the profession as such, as well as aesthetic considerations such as how should an interesting and instructive teaching be composed, but also dimensions of authenticity. The question, what kind of teacher do I want to be, is personal and born out of experience and stands at the same time in relation to the times we live in. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. You're just on time, perfectly. Okay, so we can start the discussion. Do we have any questions? Okay. We have one here. Is the speed with which social networks works in their contents, like a flash, a problem for the concentration of students? And is it a reason for them to get bored before previous generations? This is from Tony Garcia.
Sorry, it's in the chat, right?
Yeah, it is in the chat. So the speed of the content that is available to students have an impact on their concentration and boredom in comparison to previous generations, for example.
Well, my focus is on the teachers. I'm a teacher myself, so my focus is on how the teachers deal with what seems to be bored students. You don't always know if the pupils are bored. So I don't know how it's been for the students from a historical perspective in how much distractions they have now in comparison to before. But the teachers are telling me that mostly the teachers that have been working a very long time, they say that now pupils have more trouble staying focused. So they change the way they teach. They can't have as long presentations as before, and they have to do different kinds of things during a lesson in order to keep the students, the pupils, focused. So it's a competition with the computers we hand out to the students, but also with the mobile phones. Sometimes the teachers remove the mobile phones and tell them to. I think my cat is bored. She's keep jumping up here. But sometimes the pupils have their cell phones nearby. So. Mm-hmm. Was that did I answer the question sort of? Or?
Yeah, I suppose, yes. Yeah. And I have one question because this is very interesting for me. You suggested that boredom can be contagious, like a contagion mood, that one pupil, one student can inflict his or her boredom on the whole class. Could you elaborate on this? Is it how it's working according to your knowledge?
Well, as I said in the beginning, the teachers often use the word contagion, that it's something that is spreading, or an atmosphere, and the teacher can enter the room and feel or almost know already that the students are going to be bored because they were previously, or other classes were. But when they explain how they mean by this contagion, it seems more like it fits better with Ahmed's description of boredom as sticky, or that boredom circulates and stick to different things like computers and the idea of
so this is not like emotional contagious, like in the situation of this particular class, the one pupil is spreading the boredom, but the history of boredom in the previous classes, in the previous semesters, and so on, so influencing the current experience or feeling of boredom. Is it correct?
that's how the teachers explain it when they first approach the question of what boredom is and how boredom appears in the classroom. Then they use the word contagion. But when I ask more questions afterwards, it seems more like they are all actually talking about boredom as sticky. And also in relation to anxiety, that is it. Sometimes it's difficult to decide who's bored. They can pinpoint one student, say that this student is spreading boredom, but it's also in relation to anxiety that teacher actually is sometimes afraid of boredom as such. Teachers don't want to be bored and boring, and then don't want the students to be bored either.
Okay, thank you very much for this. And Angie, the last question, I suppose.
Thank you very much. Great presentation, I think. I was just curious, because obviously you were looking at the boredom of the teachers in sort of as a starting point. And I was wondering, did they have the impression that it made their job more difficult when they kind of were pushed into that situation? Basically made it their sort of the emotional response kind of then made everything else tedious as well, or not sure if I'm making my question clear.
You mean in the situation in the classroom, or?
Yes, because obviously you were talking about the fact that kind of being screen police, etc., kind of made their job boring.
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Yes. Yeah. So did that also kind of like really kind of have an impact on the rest of whatever they were doing, or?
Yeah, I would say so. When I ask teachers to pinpoint in a direct question, what is boring in your everyday life as a teacher, it is they talk about the cell phones and the screens are one thing, but also the administrative work that they are doing is also one thing that makes the job more boring. But I would say that's also affects the rest of the day, the working day as well. Yeah, because they also talk about that they are calculating with boredom. So like Nina, for instance, when she knows that this is going on in the class, that they are bored, and maybe they even think that Nina herself is boring, she also plans for it before she enters the classroom. So what am I going to do? That's practical knowledge. What am I going to do with this class so they don't get bored, because you don't want them to be bored in relation to, well, that's a big question, but do pupils learn when they are bored? I don't know. That's another question. Maybe they do. but you don't want them to be bored, because a teacher said it's boring to teach bored students. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, I had the same results in my research by other research students. So yeah, they said this. Okay, Lutz, do you want to ask very short question? Because you raised your hand. Or not?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Were you asking me? Because my my headphones made a noise. I couldn't hear what you said, but I just heard the end.
Yeah, very short question. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, I could also just write, but my question was, how does it change teaching when teachers expect students to be bored or easily bored? Because on the one hand, one would expect that then they would try to make teaching more interesting and include more impulses and so on and so on. So it could make teaching more interesting. But I was wondering if it could also have the reverse effect of actually creating boredom in class.
Yeah. I understand what you mean. Because the thing is, or do you mean boring for the pupils or the teacher?
I think the general experience of boring, so on both sides. I mean,
Yeah. Because the risk is that if we all hand out the computers to the students, so you're in a competitive situation already. But the risk is that if every teacher has this lessons where they keep on trying to keep boredom at bay with PowerPoints and Kahoots and all these different kinds of things. If every teacher do that, it becomes the same thing for the students. So they enter every classroom with the same pedagogical, what do you call it? How the lessons are planned in a similar way. If every teacher is in a competition with their cell phones and computers. So that could be more of the same, sort of, from a pupil's perspective, but it could also become the same for a teacher if like one teacher told me that she has to prepare her students before they are going to read a book or something, and she has to plan and prepare them for that. It could be boring to read this book because we are going to do this for 70 minutes. Read this book. We're not going to do anything else but read this book and focus on the text. But she has to prepare them for that it could be boring. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.